Welcome to dance. Okay.
Hi, class. Welcome to my mini lecture for film report number 2. It took me a while to get this thing going, but hold on. Okay, so first, some old business. Just a second. I wanted to talk a little bit about Pan's Labyrinth. Okay, actually, first I want to introduce you to Adelita. She wanted to say hi with the promise that she will leave us in peace after saying hi. Say hi, Addie.
Hi.
Okay, so they're going to leave us in peace now. Okay, so a couple things about Pan's Labyrinth. I've looked over all of your submitted rough drafts or your presentations and left some feedback on that. I noticed that some of you have left a little bit of feedback too. I know that's due later today at midnight, I believe. And so and make sure to read all of that, not just your feedback, because it's meant to help everyone. A couple of things I've noticed, though, to get away from talking about the ideas and so forth is a lot of you are kind of still kind of taking everything in the prompt and trying to respond to multiple issues, such as the sacred and the profane, and whether the fairy tale creatures and the tasks of Ophelia are real or imagined, and that sort of thing. It's okay to do those if it's under one common theme. For example, I've kind of modeled that a little bit in some of my comments. It's easy to work in an idea of how this film defines fascism, for example, and how it defines myth as a counter to fascism. If that's your theme, then you can talk about how Ophelia's vision in contrast to Vidal's, and how Ophelia's vision is one that's more, say, conducive to building healthy communities, as opposed to the sort of fascist way of developing community via exclusion that we see with Captain Vidal, for example. So it is possible to do that, but make sure you find a focus. Either it might be the role of myth today. This film it suggests, I think, a certain function of myth that will help oppose what I think this film argues is a element of culture that's always there, which is fascism, that's not just there, or rather was not just something that existed under Franco Spain or Hitler's Germany, but is something that is present in all cultures, and ergo needs to be repressed somehow. And I think this film argues that that can be done via myth. For example, patriarchy and resistance, that's another thing that could be used as a dominant theme that allows you to talk about a lot of different issues under that umbrella. But make sure you've got one central idea, and make sure that's your interpretation of one of the film's message, right? So if you think if the message you want to focus on most is the message it sends about, say, females or feminism, the feminist message in this film, and I think there is one, you could focus on that. And that allows you to bring in a lot of different things, but there's still a central focus, which is the film's message about a female means of creating community as opposed to a patriarchal one, which is criticized in this film, I think. So some of you have come close to those ideas, have hinted at them, have suggested them, but just haven't developed them. So just find one thing that you're going to develop and go from there. Okay. So all right. So I want to now just kind of introduce the next film report. So again, with this one, you have your choice of Harry Potter, the first one in that series, or the first in the Star Wars long series of Star Wars, the one from 1977. which technically speaking is the fourth in terms of the chronology within that film universe, but it's the first one that was produced and shown to audiences. So you have your choice of the first of either of those, or if you've, and I think with both of these, a lot of you have seen all of them. I know I have, because and because they're so popular. It's If you've seen all of them and what I would rather do an analysis of the entire series, that works as well. And I think especially for Harry Potter, that works even better than trying to focus in on just the first of the Harry Potter series. So if you've seen the entire Harry Potter series, I would recommend doing an analysis for the entire series rather than just that first one. With Star Wars, it matters a lot less, and it might be easier to just do that first film or the first trilogy, maybe the first three that premiered before the next trilogy that came out. In this film, you'll notice that I've asked you to do the same thing that we kind of did with Daedalus and Icarus, in which we did both a comparative analysis where we used Campbell's ideas, Joseph Campbell, and then we did a particularist analysis, and we spent more time on the latter in large part because I find that more useful. But I would like you to explore both types of analyses in this film report. But other than that, don't neglect everything else. As it says at the beginning of the film report, it's the same. Every film report is essentially the same. I'm reading from your assignment right now. Using critical and speculative analysis and comparative particularist methods, interpret the meaning and social significance of the film or films. Put more elaborately, what values, beliefs, ideas, and/or behaviors are promoted by the film or text, and what values, beliefs, ideas, and/or behaviors are criticized and/or censored. Think about cultural ideals, gender roles, class roles, ideas about governance or family, and so on. Why? Does the film or text reinforce or challenge cultural hegemony? Make sure to define the cultural hegemony of the culture you're discussing. In other words, how does the film help the audience assimilate or cope with or challenge the world that they live in? And so everything below that are things you might consider, but you don't have to consider any of them. The only thing that's required, that sort of an added requirement on this one, is to try both a comparative as well as a particularist analysis. But you can spend all but 2 sentences on one if you find it's not very useful, and that's fine. So another thing that I think is really helpful with this one, because our focus is on the hero's journey. So look at what we did with Gilgamesh and that first question, which is what kind of hero is Gilgamesh? Remember, you're required to use another textual source to compare and contrast the film. And a lot of you hadn't done that with Pan's Labyrinth, so that's something you might add to your film reports when you finalize them next week. But make sure you do it here. And Gilgamesh is a really easy one because we did that as a class, as is Oedipus Rex. But if you really like Norse mythology and want to go with Thor, or if you want to go, say, with a female heroine, that's always interesting to compare what an ideal female heroine is as opposed to the male heroes, and even explore the idea of why our heroes are typically male rather than female is also interesting. So think about what we did with Gilgamesh when we talked about what a different hero he is. So you might use Gilgamesh, for example, to contrast with Harry Potter. In what ways is Harry Potter a different kind of hero than Gilgamesh? I mean, to just get you started, we'll start with the obvious. Harry Potter is powerful because of his wizardry and his mind, right? Whereas Gilgamesh is powerful because of his body. So it's a different kind of machismo for sure. So that's one place to start. That tells us something about the differences between the two cultures. And we can go further from there. It's interesting because while they're both very different, if we're doing a comparative analysis, both Gilgamesh and Harry Potter have a theme of immortality that's important. So that's where we can do both kinds of analyses in order to produce and still support a singular thesis, which is that Harry Potter reinforces these values, et cetera, and so on. So one thing to remember, the hero tends to represent the ideals of a specific civilization, of a culture. So what ideals, what values, what kinds of behavior are considered ethical, et cetera, and so on, does Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker represent in this? If you do prefer the comparative analysis to the particularist analysis, and you really like Joseph Campbell, it's worth noting that George Lucas used Joseph Campbell's ideas to create that film. So they actually collaborated in making that film. So it deliberately follows the steps of the hero's journey. Whereas J.K. Rowling has said she was uninfluenced by Joseph Campbell in producing her works. So that might help you decide which kind of analysis you're going to focus on, depending on which film series you choose. So, and again, that's what we're doing, is we're really going to focus on what the hero tells us about our cultural hegemony, right? Ideology, if you remember that word from the Mark Fisher article, ideology is not like somebody holding a stopwatch in front of you and hypnotizing you and telling you to believe this or not believe that. It works more to confuse or obfuscate our relationship with reality. This is Louis Althusser's idea, is that ideology is the imagined relationship we have to our real conditions of existence. So we might imagine, for example, that we're really lucky to have a job, and we're really fortunate that we did all that, but the reality is that we have to have a job. It's probably not the job we would have chosen had we been completely free to choose our labor in this world, et cetera, and so on. So it's a way of, it's sort of like colored glasses. The rose-colored glasses is a way to think of ideology, is a way to make things look a little more tolerable to us so that we don't really actively resist them. So look for that in these films. Both of these films are, I'll just tell you right now, neither of these films are counter-hegemonic. That's not an argument you probably want to make. And that's probably true for any film that's super popular. If it's super popular, it probably tells you it's reinforcing cultural hegemony in some way. Counter-hegemonic works would be far less popular for the simple reason that they would make people uncomfortable, would challenge the way people think, et cetera, and so on. And that's interesting because you look at Star Wars, and we know George Lucas used the Vietnamese as the example for the rebels. The Vietnamese fighting the Americans. So Darth Vader's troops were seen as the Empire, and it was Luke Skywalker's crew who were based on the Vietnamese fighting against Empire. And so you would think, oh, that's obviously counter-hegemonic. But it's really not. And there's a lot of good articles I posted for both of these. Read those over. Remember, you are required to at least use some written material in your film reports to make your arguments. But it's up to you how much you choose, but make sure to at least use one, that we are going to do that compare-contrast thing. So something in the book and maybe one of the articles. But the articles, I can always tell the students who have read the articles and the ones who haven't, because the quality of the former is just way better. So really try and make sure that you do that. I haven't found it yet. I usually show this as a short clip of a video, but I will post in the discussions after this video, and as well as an announcement, some link to Joseph Campbell's ideas. It may not be the video link that I wanted to share, that I usually share in class. I'm trying to find that exact one, but if I don't, I'll post something else. But also note that there's lots of stuff in your textbook about Joseph Campbell as well. But again, you might just spend a couple sentences on Joseph Campbell's monomyth, or Jung. You can use the archetypes here as well, and then just go into your sort of Bruce Lincoln analysis as explained in the prompt, in which you talk about the differences. And I think that's usually a lot easier and usually produces better papers, is the ones who say, okay, look, Gilgamesh and Harry Potter are very different. Luke Skywalker is very different from Oedipus, right? Although there are some similarities, so we could do both. There is something about the tragic hero that we could plug into Harry Potter to a degree. Harry Potter has a sort of tragic upbringing. He's an orphan, these sorts of things. Same with Luke Skywalker. So there are some things we can, in other words, we can do both kinds of analyses. So I hope this was helpful for everyone. As always, shoot me an email if you'd like, if you have any questions. And just a reminder, so the final film reports for Film Report 1 are due Tuesday at midnight, as well as your new presentations / rough drafts. And we'll we'll do it the exact same way we did it we did it with Film Report number 1. And every week from here out, every Tuesday from here out, it will be the same requirements. We'll have a new film report due, or presentation due, and you'll finalize the one from the previous week to turn that in, and you put that in the Dropbox under the assignments tab, and I'll grade them from there. So I hope you all are well. Yeah, it's still weird for me not being able to see my students, and I much prefer that, but hopefully we get through it all right. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you until the next video.